I think it's safe to say that I fucking love Guardians of the Galaxy. Better yet, I think it's an understatement at this point that I love Guardians of the Galaxy. If there was any bit of confusion, any bit of misunderstanding, I fucking love Guardians of the Galaxy. I can't really explain to people why I love this movie as much as I do. Or the only thing that I can honestly say that could give you some idea of why I like this so much is that it's just made for me. It's so many elements of that just that appeal to me. It's a comic book movie. I love comic books and I love superheroes. I love old classic music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. This movie is jam packed full with them. Okay, that's kind of an understatement at this point. It's got funny characters and funny jokes. I love funny characters and funny jokes. The characters are kind of assholes, but with hearts of gold. I love characters who are assholes but have hearts of gold. And it's just made for me. That's the only way I can describe it. It's just a movie made for me. If someone who I didn't know wanted to know me better, and they wanted to know me fast, and I would just hand them this movie and just tell them this movie is basically my personality, and you have to know about me and just what I enjoy. This movie was a surprise success back when it came out in 2014. It was a huge, huge surprise success that people didn't really see coming because, honestly, Guardians of the Galaxy, the property from Marvel, was a unknown, really just sort of not even B, C, D, or E list. It was like, in my opinion, Z list compared to other stuff like the Avengers or Spider-Man or any other Marvel property that had been made into a movie at that point. And it was a huge risk and it was a huge gamble back at the time when this movie came out because no one really knew what to think of it. No one had heard of Guardians of the Galaxy, at least average Joe moviegoers, comic book fans maybe, but even that's pushing it a little bit. It was set in space because it still came out at a time when you really couldn't do aliens or, weird sci-fi elements in a superhero comic book movie. I mean, the Avengers had done aliens, sure, but even still then, they were sort of pushed in the background and really not the forefront of the movie, where it's placed in space. Some of the main characters are aliens or genetically modified characters or whatever. So this was just a huge risk in terms of tone, scale, and just, IP and, and known properties that Marvel had to do at the time. But then again, back in 2008, so was Iron Man. Not really anyone knew who the hell the character Iron Man was, but that movie turned out to be a big success. No one really knew who the Avengers were, or even the characters that accompanied the Avengers. But that movie turned out to be a billion-dollar success. So at this point, Marvel just took the risk and they just ran with it. They made Guardians of the Galaxy, and they made it into the best possible version of the Guardians of the Galaxy that they could have made. When I say that I'm a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean that I'm a fan of the movie version. Honestly, at this point, 2017, that's kind of the only version that there is. The characters were revamped back in 2008, but these characters originated way back in 1969. So these characters were extremely unknown, and I read some of the versions of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the 2008 revamp at the very least, and I just have to say to you guys, it's boring as shit. It's just really uninteresting. At least, I guess, maybe compared to the movie. If I read it back in 2008, or at least before when this movie came out, it might be a little bit interesting. But just compared to what I have here to what I have in the comic, this is way better. And I guess Marvel took note of that because they've retroactively changed the history of the Guardians of the Galaxy to better fit the way it is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, you look at any comic book of Guardians of the Galaxy now, they look the way they do in the movie. Like Star-Lord, for example. The only way I can describe Star-Lord's look in the comics back in 2008 and until this movie came out is that he's kind of like a Confederate soldier with a robot head in space. And now, if you look at a comic book of any Guardians of the Galaxy character or one that includes Star-Lord, Star-Lord looks the way he does in this movie. Even I was taken aback at how surprisingly huge and successful this movie became. So many other people, grasped onto this franchise and just love the franchise as much as you did. It's really comforting. It makes you enjoy the movie even more that so many other people are enjoying it as much as you are. It's crazy that we live in a time when Guardians of the Galaxy is celebrated along the lines of the Avengers. And even then that's crazy because the Avengers were not that celebrated, the characters, at least among, again, average Joe moviegoers. Everyone loves the Avengers, and again, in turn, everyone loves Guardians of the Galaxy. With that said, the movie is not without its flaws. I'll definitely say that. I love this movie, and this review is going to be biased as hell, but the movie definitely is full of flaws. My biggest flaw, in terms of pacing, the movie just goes way too fast, and like I said, the movie is weird and wacky and zany and has a lot of weird stuff going on throughout the movie. All this weird stuff sink in. It kind of just whisks you along and kind of just goes at a really fast pace. I mean, the movie's about like 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and it feels about an hour and a half, which is good. Some movies have the opposite problem where they are actually shorter and they feel way longer, or movies that are long and feel even longer than that of their runtime. Rather a movie feels shorter than it honestly is than have it be longer than it honestly is. But again, like I said, there's some weird stuff in this movie that, really will take you sort of a second time to really let sink in. And also, an issue that runs through almost every single Marvel film is the movie's villain, Ronan the Accuser. Which is disappointing to say because from what I hear in the comics, he's actually kind of an interesting villain. Even sometimes filling an anti-hero role of some sorts. But in this movie, he's just extremely one note. All you get from him is he doesn't like this group of aliens and he wants to exterminate them. That's about it. That's as deep as you get. But then looking back at it, the movie pays more attention on fleshing out its characters, which makes sense because the movie called Guardians of the Galaxy needs to flesh out these characters. Like I mentioned before, the characters were not well known before this movie, so fleshing out the characters and making them well known to the audiences as well as likable makes a lot of sense. In the grand scheme of everything, this movie needed to just be as simple as it was. It needed to play it safe, it needed to take its time with its characters, and it needed to just tell a simple story that the audience could go along with these characters. So that's why I don't really look too much forward in terms of story with this movie. I just look at it in terms of entertainment and characters. I say that if your movie doesn't have the best of stories or the most original stories or even one of the most interesting stories ever, then at the very least have likable characters, or even better yet, relatable and likable characters. So that way, no matter what the characters are going through, the audience will go along with them no matter what situation they're in or no matter what kind of form of story they're in. It's basically like Star Wars. What was Star Wars about? Just a bunch of people stopping a bad guy from taking over the universe. Simple as that. What was this movie about? Well, a couple of good guys stopping a bad guy from taking over the universe. Galaxy. Basically the same thing. In very few words, this is Marvel's Star Wars, or this is this generation's Star Wars. But for me personally, this is my favorite corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Just the most fun that I've had with the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. It's self-contained. My major problem with a lot of the Marvel films is that they're too busy setting up future movies instead of focusing on their own story and characters. This is the main problem with Avengers Age of Ultron. It's a major problem, really much the extremely huge major problem in Iron Man 2, is that they focus on setting up their future movies instead of focusing on their own story and characters that are in that movie right then. Many other Marvel movies have set aside this problem and have actually made great films along the way. Captain America, Winter Soldier, and even Civil War to an extent are prime examples of these. But Guardians of the Galaxy fully captures that idea and just tells a simplified, self-contained story that doesn't need the Avengers and doesn't really need any of the things that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has. It's its own self-contained story, its own fun story, and honestly, every single time I watch this movie, I'm always hooked on a feeling. Can't forget to mention the awesome mixtape Volume 1 soundtrack in the movie, and it's definitely awesome. Again, one of the reasons why I like this movie is how it relates to what I enjoy of many different genres of entertainment like music and movies. In this instance, music, which is having a soundtrack consisting of music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'm a huge fan of music from those three eras, and it's great to hear music in here that I've heard before, but also be introduced to new music that I'm not all that familiar with. The main reason why it's as impressive as it is, and the main reason why it's as celebrated as it is, at least in my opinion, is that they don't just have a bunch of music, especially popular music or music that people were familiar with in this movie, just to have an interesting or good soundtrack that they can sell later on after the movie comes out. It's that they actually make the music a part of the story. James Gunn, when writing the movie, really paid attention to a lot of the lyrics and a lot of the music that was being used for the movie, and actually opted to make a story out of the music. And if you really listen closely to a lot of the music in this movie, it fits perfectly with the scenes that they're in, and it actually sort of creates a story in and of itself. Because outside of this movie, I can't really think of any time that a movie or any other piece of media actually made the soundtrack a part of the story outside of, well, maybe a musical. But this is a prime example of how you do it. And it's honestly made a lot of great things out of it, but it's kind of ruined a lot of movies for me, in my opinion, at least. I believe, like, ever since this movie came out, comic book movies especially, if not in some action movies, have opted to use a lot of old music to be put, at least in their trailers or in the actual movie themselves. But unlike this movie, they actually don't try to fit it into the story in any way, shape, or form. They just opt to do it just because it's what made Guardians of the Galaxy successful, but that's not made it what made it successful. They actually put time into making the music fit for the movie, and in the other movies, they really don't. The movie is prime example. This is something like Kong, Skull Island, and especially Suicide Squad. Just no with that movie. Just no.